Welcome to, I am the, okay, let's start again. Hello, everyone. My name is Peggy Samdi. I am the president of the New York Book Forum, and I'd like to welcome you to Lapse in Literacy Part 2. So the reason it's Lapse in Literacy Part 2 is last year, we had Lapse in Literacy Part 1, and it was such an learning experience for our audience and for ourselves, and we had such amazing panelists that we have invited some of them back to continue talking about literacy in the space and the work they're doing with their organizations to improve literacy in the space and talk about books, and especially as we struggle in the world, to talk about reading and what kids can read and what that implies for the adults in their world and for the industry at large. So I'm going to introduce Kate Davis. She is the Associate Director of the New Jersey Free Public Library.
Don't forget the free.
Yes. Kate is our moderator tonight, and she's going to lead us through a discussion about what's happening in the literacy space now, a year later. And, you know, if you have questions, hold them to the end. But everyone, we're about to learn about how fascinating the literacy space is. So I'm handing it over to Kate. Thank you.
Thank you. So hi, everyone. I'm Kate Davis. I'm the Assistant Director of the Jersey City Free Public Library. I'm going to try to be as quiet as possible because I was someone that listened to the last panel and was so excited for everything that everyone had to say. So I really want to hear from everyone more than myself. But I do want to give everyone an opportunity to introduce themselves. And last time the moderator, Demoza, had a really lovely question. Mine is not as lovely, but I'm going to try. So please introduce yourself and say who's someone that inspired you as a child to love reading, because I'm working on the assumption everyone here loves to read. That's why we're so dedicated to fixing this lapse in literacy. So Jill, will you kick us off?
I'd be honored. Thank you, Kate. Or Katie,
Kate.
Which do you prefer? Okay, Kate. So my name is Jill Heath, and I am the CEO and president of Heart of America Foundation. You'll have to forgive me. I have a little allergies. It's that season and time of year. So Heart of America, has anyone heard of Heart of America? Oh, yay. It's usually the case. So Heart of America is an education equity nonprofit that focuses on resources and spaces. We have a great belief that in order to unlock the greatest learning potential, you need great motivating teachers or caring adults. You need great resources and access to them, as well as inviting, comfortable, safe, and inspiring learning spaces. And I think we're going to talk a little about spaces in general and just the curation of that. We're a national organization based in DC, and we work in every single state. And the majority of our work is transformation. So think of extreme home makeover, but school edition, library edition. The other hat I'm wearing tonight is I am a member and a proud member of the Diverse Books for All Coalition, which is now a coalition that's increased since last year with over 40 nonprofits coming together and really taking a look at how we secure, procure, and provide access to diverse literature across the country. We are really proud of the fact that we're very small and mighty individually, but collectively we make up over 20% of the market share in book purchasing. So, which is a really unique element of our work, and so we are encouraging the publishing industry to look differently at diverse books, particularly in terms of affordability. So, on to my friend Andre.
Thanks so much for that.
Oh, I didn't answer the question. Oh, yeah.
I'll let you answer the question.
All right, so excited. I would say my mother. I remember very well as a young child, she had a very special book, and it was The Hobbit, and it was within like a book, like sleeve, and you'd take it out, and it was like this. I thought it was 100 years old. It smelled different, and we would all lay on the carpet while she read to us. And it just allowed me to start to dream and imagine and realize that reading can take you places and teach you. So.
Thanks so much. I guess when they say that you are invited the second time, you must have did something right the first time. So we are glad to be back at Scholastic to talk about the lapse in literacy. My name is Andre Eaton. I'm the New York State Director for Parent Child Plus. Parent Child Plus focuses on really the early years with parents who have children or primary caregivers who have children as young as 16 months up to age 4 or right before they go into school. We have what we call a true programmatic cycle, which is a curriculum that's based upon their social development and also providing tools primarily for the families in their most safe environment, which is inside their home. We bring in 46 books through the methodology of home visitation. Every time that we go into the home, we visit with them for at least 30 minutes each. And our home visitors are known as early learning specialists, which models for the parents on how to use that book or educational toy that's provided to them over that 2 programmatic cycle period. By the time we leave them, they have 46 books inside their home. The books can be in English or in the native language of that particular family. And again, our whole focus is really preparing children to enter school to succeed, but also build that 2-generational approach of parents really engaging with the children. And what we found out through our outcomes is that they stay involved once their child goes into pre-K or kindergarten program overall. And we also now work with home-based child care providers too as well. For those who cannot stay with us for the 2 programmatic cycles, we now take our skills and provide resources for home-based child care because we know that licensed child care can be very expensive. Those of you that have children or your children are now grown and had to place them in child care, that can get very expensive. And we find that a lot of our families, particularly around New York City, and New York State rather, are using family, neighbor, and friend. And we go in and also provide a whole curriculum on how to engage and build that particular workforce and the tools that they need in order to be great home-based child care providers overall. We are a national organization with over 116 program partners in 6 countries. We just this year have moved into the state of Maryland and in Baltimore, but our focus is really on low-income communities across the board. I help to support 26 program partners statewide, so all the way up from Onondaga County, New York, Westchester, Rockland County, Long Island, and of course New York City where we're based. And I'll stop there because I can keep going for a really long time. But again, also too, there were actually 2 influences in my life that assisted me in reading, and that was my mom. Some of you that were with me last year, I talked about her and how she had to raise 4 children on her own. And what she said first is that what you get into your brain can no one take away. And I've been in school since age 3, and she helped on her own, and the assistance, not really on her own, but the assistance of her aunts, my great aunts, put 4 kids through college. But she was that influence. And then I would also say my faith-based organization, my church, just going to Sunday school and being picked up, and you were in different classes for different age groups and so forth. So the first book that you really learned was faith materials, mostly the Bible, and as they discussed that. So that was how I got started in reading.
My name is Erin Salgi. I've been the director of the Anderson Library at Morristown Beard School in Morristown for the past 8 years. I've been in school libraries for about 15 years, but I started my career in education as an AmeriCorps literacy volunteer, which kind of put me on a different path. I thought I was going to go to law school, and here I am today. Very passionate about literacy and books and have seen it evolve in the past 15 years, and same boring answer, I guess. My mom taught me to read when I was 3, which is wild to me as the parent of a 5 and a 2-year-old now. I'm like, what did you do? How did you do it? I was very bored in kindergarten as a result, so I chose to not do that for my 5-year-old for a variety of reasons, but definitely my mom set me on that path. Just our house was full of things to read at all times, whether it was a pile of magazines or books, and I've kind of strived to do that for my own children, just a house full of things to read.
Awesome. So it kind of speaks to the work of Parent Child Plus, that parents are very important in this process. But also, like, wow, round of applause for all the work that you're doing. Like, yes, the Lapse literacy is real, and the work that you're doing is amazing. So thank you for being here. My first question is something that was at the end of the last Lapse to Literacy book banning, where people were like, we could have a whole discussion about it. So we're going to try not to have the whole discussion about book banning, but research has just come out that this has been a record year this past year. And we have a room of publishers here and people in the industry. So I'm wondering how each of you are navigating it in your different roles, and how do you feel publishers are doing, or what they could be doing to support people that are on the ground dealing with this in a meaningful way. I don't know if anyone wants to jump in first.
I see, I'm a librarian currently. I have been lucky. I said at the beginning of this year, I'm either going to get COVID or have a book banned this year, because neither of them have happened to me in the past 4 years. And neither of those have happened yet. But peer schools nearby kind of sent up the bat signal over the summer, you know, this is happening to us. And I felt like I had been kind of hiding and playing defense for several years, that I was just waiting for this to come. And this fall decided I was going to go on the offensive instead and start doing lessons with our students about book banning and get them involved. So if their parents get that idea in their head, because it's not coming from the kids to ban the books, that they say, you know, like, actually, did you know, you know, they can actually their parents on my behalf. So I started being very proactive, but it is 100% at our shores as school librarians, and I watch footage from the next town over of the council meeting that goes on for 6 hours with the librarian defending their livelihood. And I know it's happening to our independent schools as well. And I think that from talking to other librarians, there is a little bit of a sense that we're kind of out there fighting this, and we don't know where the publishers are in terms of how they're willing to support us and step in. You know, these are our livelihoods, and the terrible things that are being lobbed at librarians about all sorts of language choices. We're kind of feeling like we're fighting it on the ground. We would love to have a little bit more support from the publishers to say, you know, like, we're the ones advocating for your books, please have our backs too.
And yeah, I would definitely agree with that, and I think that's where it starts too as well. We have to build a coalition and collaboration to make sure that books do not get banned. But the question I think we really need to start out with is why? Why the banning of books, and why is this happening across the board? Who is going to benefit from a banned book? And usually when we talk about banning books, usually it has something to do with someone not liking someone's cultural identity, someone's gender, or someone that's trying to proclamate some sort of ideology that probably goes against their particular norm too as well. And so those are the things that we have to combat. And the big elephant in the room is also racism. We know from the history in this country that enslaved Africans were not allowed to read in this nation because it was a threat to the ideology of slavery. If folks found out who they were identity-wise, and they began to not only learn how to read, but also learn how to write, what kind of threat would that be to the particular system? And so we're seeing that kind of rise up again in this century, which is absolutely amazing. And then 100 years of segregation too, as well, as some folks had more resources, and we still have that, the inequity of resources. I heard a great quote today at one of my meetings today on literacy and the science of reading, and it said that literacy is the language of opportunity and a matter of equity and access. And when you ban books, when you stop giving materials to parents and tools to the parents, not only just books in English, but also books in their own language, not allowing to tell their story, we become inequitable. We limit that particular access. We stop the growth of critical thinking. Some folks say, well, we don't want folks to be indoctrinated. It's not indoctrination. It's indoctrination versus education. And we're trying to educate from the youngest all the way up through college and beyond. You stop us from getting the information that we need to do what I call critical thinking. Some of you know this too as well. I'm preaching to the choir. You know, in college, they taught you how to critically use your mind and think. You can like a book or not like a book, but at least you have the information in order to do so. In my program, we don't ban books, and we push that forward, although we're located in certain states that are now looking at educational curriculums that have decided to not use certain books and so forth. But we try to get as many books into the hands to the parents that we service, and we have them in over 55 different languages nationally.
And I would just piggyback on the critical thinking. So from our standpoint and Diverse Books for All Coalition, it is really about access and having materials that, different cultures, different thinkers see themselves in. And when we start to restrict and ban books, you are banning a way of thinking, right? And so critical thinking can only be developed if you have a yin and a yang. And, we wonder why civil discourse is not where it should be. It's because we're not educating our children and allowing them to read different points of view. So unfortunately, I think through book banning and even the restriction of certain teachings in the public schools and beyond right now is creating a really politicized environment. And in my mind, in our organization's mind, and I know the coalition, education should not be politicized. It is a civil right for all of us. And unfortunately, these little things, book bans, the not teaching certain histories, is whittling away at that opportunity and foundation. So we at Heart of America, we supply all titles as age appropriate, developmentally appropriate, in as many languages as we can. And we are trying to support librarians from the back end. So maybe a book is being taken off the shelf, but then can we supply them with the same title to actually give away to students to take home? So we're trying to counter in really smart, strategic ways, and we will continue to do so, like all of us up here.
Absolutely. And I think everyone kind of touched on the importance of these books, and specifically diverse books, for critical thinking. And so how do you feel about cultivating a culture of literacy in general? Because literacy is beyond reading, it's writing, and writing inspires critical thinking when you have to write and think about what you've read, respond to it. So how do you, feel about cultivating that complete culture of literacy?
I can start. Maybe we'll go backwards this time. Because our organization focuses on education material and resources, books are one of those things. But we also know that there are different types of genres of books, and I think last panel discussion we talked a lot about, comic books and visual learning books. We all learn differently as learners, and reading Chaucer might not resonate with my 15-year-old son, but reading an anime book, maybe about the same subject and or Chaucer-ismed, could work. So, we have to provide materials that really meet the student and the parents as well where they're at. So it's about the physical book, it's about the online exposure and reading, and it's about writing, which I know that writing in its true form is an expression. And I asked during our prep call, does anyone remember young authors? Or was that just a Michigan thing? Okay, well, in every grade we had to write our own original story. And it was really sweet. Like, I think my story was about Slippy Slimy Salamander, and it was one of my proudest moments. I still have the book, and I didn't win a prize, but it elevated writing, it elevated reading on a superhero level. And I think we need to continue to do that. Maybe even thinking bigger with the national level. So the big read, maybe we need to push out the big read more in our collective organizations and really have a national discussion around things. So
I guess we're still going this way. For me, I think also too with the banning, I think we're also hurting authors as well. I talked about this last time, I believe, and that's allowing the cultures to really tell their story by authors who are also of that particular culture and really getting that out. No longer just celebrating a month. It's great to celebrate Black History Month as we did in February, Latin American History Month, Asian American History Month, but really embedding that throughout the curriculum so that everyone can see that there are different authors, there are different cultures, and how do you embed that? Then second, also, for those families that we work with, because we see that parents are the primary teachers inside the home, and really are the ones that are at the forefront of really preparing their children for school, is really bringing those books into the native languages that those families speak. We know that the research says it doesn't matter as long as you have that interaction between that parent or primary caregiver with their child inside their home. That's the benefit to develop the social emotional development. We also use play. Play is a part of literacy too as well. That total engagement, even from a caring adult or a home-based child care provider too as well, in bringing that into the literacy space and into the science of reading. It's more than phonics, it's more than training. I think that, again, training teachers is also great, but again, we're definitely advocates of also providing tools for all the families that we work with, because as we all know in this room, there are different systems of education in districts that are more affluent, have more resources than others. Let's work on those particular communities that have the lack of resources, and that's what Parent Child Plus tries to do on a daily basis.
Amen.
I think a lot about, I have a dearly departed colleague who used to say you can't beat the dinner table in terms of what you're delivering, and it really speaks to Parent Child Plus, like as parents, as our primary delivery, what we're telling them happened in history, they're probably going to end up believing what their parents believe in, and something that I've really been thoughtful about is changing our summer reading programming to a summer learning, where there's a book and there's also a list of podcasts, other media, and parents get this too. And I encourage them, you can read this too. You can listen to this podcast. You may not have time to read this whole book. You can definitely listen to a 30-minute podcast when you're in the car, and it's thematic. So you're talking to your seniors about sustainability. You're talking to your juniors about leadership. So getting the parents involved and getting every department in the school involved. So something that I've really pushed is to try to get reading out of the humanities. Like, I love the humanities, I'm a humanities person, but if the students are seeing that their physics teacher who has a PhD is also a romantasy fan, I feel like that's really powerful for them to see reading as this thing that's not just like an extra or not just something that your crazy librarian is telling you to do. Like, everyone in the school is doing it. The baseball coach just read The Color of Law and he wants to talk to you about redlining. That is a really powerful culture to build in a school, and it's something that I've really pushed, that I'm not the only person reading, and I'm trying to show them that all these other adults in the community, it's a really valuable part of their lives, and their parents are too, and giving them these opportunities to have the discussions with their parents about the things that they read and they listen to in class, so that way we're not fighting the dinner table.
Absolutely.
So as we're talking through this, it occurred to me I have some books and examples of the books that we have worked with publishers on. So the Diverse Books for All Coalition sent out an RFP last January, and we received to over 38 publishers, and we landed on 4. That will be producing 130,000 books and disseminating them across the country. But these are the books we're talking about. So one is about the Bread Fest, which is a cultural story through and through about sourdough. And they're all bilingual. The other is about Dumpling Day. And this is focused on Asian culture and the importance of dumplings and how they are very relevant, as in many cultures, associated with holidays and special historic moments. And, talking about writing and reading, when we have more authors writing and they're from their original lens and culture, we preserve the culture. And we work extensively as an organization in Navajo Nation, and I think I mentioned this last time, but that language wasn't written down until 1995. So the importance of books and writing that language down is going to preserve their history and storytelling because it's disappearing, and their language. So just another nod to authors and how important they are as the scribes in history of our lives. So.
Absolutely. So I always like to end kind of with a call to action. We've been hearing and talking a lot about the lapse in literacy. And again, we have a little bit of a platform here. We have publishers in the room. What's your dream project that you could do? I'll start. I want an adult Scholastic book fair. I'm a grown-up, and I want to go to a Scholastic book fair. My library will pilot it. But I'm sure you each have your own dreams, so let's end with a call to action.
You know, we have for Diverse Books for All Coalition, we have another RFP coming up. I would love to double the amount of publishers that actually submit and maybe double the amount of purchasing. So I just think we're at a precipice where books are our storytellers and our history keepers, and we need to be really diligent of creating a movement that infuses literacy in every single aspect of our life. And we talked about it on buses, in homes, at school, after school, in hospitals. You know, so my wish is that anyone here that's a publisher will receive our RFP and hear our call to action.
Mine is to continue to break the silos. My program works with a number of different initiatives that are bringing the literacy spaces together. Any space you can create for literacy is an opportunity for children and for families to come together to learn. But I think also building strong coalitions, for example, like Cities First Readers that we're part of. It's an initiative of 15 different organizations, public libraries, not-for-profits like mine, from 0 to 3rd grade that are coming together and following that over continuum to make sure that their family continue to have those particular resources. To continue to not only look at those communities that have these particular resources, but those that don't have these particular resources. Let's go to those particular communities and continue to make sure that they are provided, because I think every child and every family should have the opportunity to gain literacy skills. Parents gain the skills that they need to work inside the home, and making sure that we're building a pathway to success and not a prison to path pipeline for failure in our country, and that's been in existence for far too long. We can break the cycle. We need to invest in doing that, and we need to bring along Scholastic. We need to bring along the publishers. We need to bring along more authors together. So we all have to stay in this fight together.
Mine is very granular. As a librarian, I feel like we've been asking for books for 13 to 15-year-olds for years and years. Please give them to us. And also, please give us funny books. I feel like we have a whole generation that loves Dog Man, and then we lose them at around age 13 because all of a sudden the books are very serious. And I think that we need those serious books, and people need to see themselves mirrored in these difficult books that are often being banned because people are like, no kid should read this, and you're telling that to a kid who that's their life. But like, I need Book Smart and Super Bad in a book to hand to a student. Like, that's my boots on the ground feel. Like, please give us funny books, and please give us books for 13 to 15-year-olds and for like college age. We have to stop having just like YA is all 18-year-olds. We need it on both sides of that. So if there's any publishers listening, I am part of a huge organization of all these independent school librarians. It's constantly talked about that 13 to 15-year-old drop. We just lose so many folks who were heavy readers of the things that are being put together in these walls, Dog Man. We just don't have that for the readers who are craving it, and we don't want to lose them. We want to keep them in adulthood, becoming readers and showing them that. So, funny books, please.
I also wanted to add one other thing. Aside, I think we all agree we just need more access and more diversity in reading. But I also want to really have us look at libraries as they're no longer the quiet space of the past. I mean, there are certain wings that are important, but they should be the cherished spaces, the community gathering spaces. And unfortunately, what's happening in some of our states in the public schools, and we work all over in the public schools, there's one particularly large district that is turning libraries into what they call them rooms, which is a ridiculous name, but it's to refocus and re-energize, but it's essentially detention rooms. So, and our organization created over 15 complete library makeovers in this district, and they're disassembling the libraries. So we have to fight for spaces to gather that hold the information. It reminds me of Cloud Cuckoo Land if you've read it, so.
Yeah, sorry, can I jump in?
Yes.
As the steward of a space that is a community gathering space, I think getting different generations to understand the purposes that these spaces can serve in schools and in communities, that they are not these silos of knowledge anymore. They are really a gathering place for folks. So, and the kids have to be comfortable in that space in order to want to pick up a book. If you are keeping this dusty, angry, shushing place, they're not going to come in and say like, oh, do you also have the new Colleen Hoover? No, that's not going to happen. So you need to have these vibrant, life-filled, light-filled spaces. It's something that I feel very, very strongly about as the steward of probably of a not-so-quiet library myself. So maybe it hit me personally there.
Yeah, keep it up. I mean, maker spaces, innovation labs, they should all be part of this.
Absolutely, and this all touches on how literacy is like an act of social justice. And I know Andrea has spoken about this. I don't know if you want to kind of wrap it up, speaking about the importance of that.
It's very important, I think, to have the gaps that we continue to have is one of the greatest social injustices that's facing our nation. Because we do know that kids have the ability and the opportunity to read, and parents want to also see their children also succeed. So let's celebrate culture, let's celebrate the books, let's create those spaces, whether it's in the library, in the home. We work with homeless families sometimes, and sometimes the workers that we work with have to meet with them in cars, and we'll read to them in cars. It's dire, and we need to make sure that every family has the opportunity to success moving forward. And so let's eradicate this injustice.
Absolutely, and as a librarian, the library space is a space for everybody, so encourage that. I see Peggy grabbing a mic.
I'm grabbing the mic for Q&A.
Awesome.
And see if anyone has questions. Okay, here I come. Yeah.
Before I steal this from you.
Oh, yeah.
Hello, this was a great panel, so thank you. For the programs that are operating in all the 5 boroughs, what's been your response to New York City recently closing the library hours on Sunday? I know that was a huge blow in terms of access, in terms of free SAT prep. I know growing up, for me, like having those library hours were very critical, and just having that be closed, that was a huge blow. So I just want to know what your response was.
We advocate and support any area that needs to have those particular times and those time frames for access to books. And so I do a lot in advocacy. Right now, the New York State Legislature is going through a session. I'll be up there tomorrow to help not only my program, but all programs that actually have an investment in literacy to increase the dollar amount for reading, particularly. My focus, again, is in the early years, but particularly in any year that a child is actually in development. So it is a need and continue to be in a need, because we know some families, they work all during the week and they may not be able to get to the library but on Sunday. And so we have to be flexible and keep those hours available for access for families to actually participate. So again, I want to again try to push all of you too as well to write your state legislator and say we need those dollars back, we need the funding back. We talk about closing spaces, but a lot of this is an investment of dollars. We have certain champions of the state legislature. I'm proud of that, and some even nationally and at the national level too as well. And so we're pushing for that, and we advocate for that tremendously wherever we are. And so you're part of a team, you're part of the continuum and the coalition, and so we need to fight together. And again, not be siloed.
There you go. Yes.
If I just talk, but okay.
We're recording, so.
That's okay. No problem. Well, very great discussion, from all of you. I had a question about positive childhood experiences. So there's been a lot of research, on adverse childhood experiences. The positive childhood experiences are gaining momentum, kind of like the new kid on the block. Of course, early literacy is definitely part of that landscape. Have any of your organizations looked into support from some of the foundations and organizations that are leading that charge? Because I wonder with their funding and their platforms, if they would also be able to be an ally in this and say that this is actually a protective childhood factor that you're also taking away. And now that there's been all of this research about toxic stress and adverse childhood experiences and the costs associated with that, this might be a good path to look at. I just was curious if that's something you've looked at.
I'll take it again. Absolutely. And there are a number of different foundations in New York, some that we're a part of. I mentioned Cities First Readers for one. They made an investment of $5 million for a citywide initiative around literacy. But you have foundations like the Pinkerton Foundation that kind of built a coalition of organizations from the libraries to look at certain communities around the city. They're in 3 right now: South Jamaica, Queens, East Harlem, and East New York, Brooklyn. In those particular communities, they have the lowest 3rd grade reading test scores. And that's why they built that coalition. They now have brought in the Carmel Hill Fund to actually help support the particular coalitions. We have about 15 organizations that they have to fund. And we do it on what I call the blended and braided approach. So that can't only be from private foundations. We need to also invest from the public sector as well and get them involved. And that's why I also talk about talking to your local state senator and your local state assembly person, because they've got the discretionary funds. It's what they want to get back up and get behind. Every year I hear the same thing: we don't have the money. But people will fund what they champion, and they will support what they champion. And that's what we need to do. The Robin Hood Foundation is another huge one programmatically that has given millions of dollars, not only to support our programs, but now backing up what you're presenting, the research and positive parenting, self-reflection. One of the things that came out of the pandemic for us is that we had to rely on the parents because we couldn't go into their homes with a home visiting model. So we had to watch them on the screen, and literally our early learning specialists, which are our home visitors, were dropping off books and doing the session through Zoom or a video call. And so we had to make sure they had a device and had the internet. However, I'm still an advocate for the hard book in the home, and not so much screen time anyway. But we had to use those tools during the pandemic, and what we found out is that all of us we should have realized this anyway, that parents are more resilient than you think they are. And they will do a lot for their children to help their children succeed. And we didn't see our program go down during the pandemic. We actually had waiting lists. We went beyond our capacity with many of our programs, not only in New York City, but statewide.
And I'll just add, what was the term again? Positive
Childhood experiences.
So there was a landmark study on adverse childhood experiences.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And now there's actually a published study a few years back about positive childhood experiences and how they can actually have tangible, evidence-based impact on these children who are in the most vulnerable communities.
Yeah.
So it's a more proactive than reactive approach, and so that's where it's going.
And I love that. I'd love to dive into the study. What we're seeing across the country is that, post-pandemic and also post-civil unrest and continued kind of just disagreement across the country, that the kids and teachers are experiencing, and librarians, I'm sure too, a lot of trauma. And so we're creating these wellness spaces in schools, and you think about what a book can do for a child that is not in a good situation, they can escape, right? We also know that books, and whether they be picture books or even drawing and reading, will flip something in the brain that will change how you're feeling. If you're super anxious and you can focus and start reading, so they're tools that I think literacy is tools for those positive experiences. And I'm hoping that there's some study, that part of the study does include that.
We know that the research is around positive parenting, that when a child has positive experiences with a caring adult, with the parents, the ACEs goes down. But we know that the families that we're working with are going through a lot of traumatic experiences, economically, socially, and so forth. And so the plus for Parent Child Plus is also, we work with social service agencies that actually put those other wraparound services around that family. So not only is the focus on the child, but what does the family need? Food, clothing, shelter. We were grateful during the pandemic that we had organizations and foundations that were willing to give to those immediate needs to lessen those particular stresses so that parents can have continued positive engagement with the child. And that's a large part of the development of the child are those positive engagements with adults.
We made a real push post-COVID to focus on the library as a wellness space. We were shut down. I mean, we were in person 2020, but students couldn't come to us, which as an extroverted librarian was very painful for me. But we started these Wellness Wednesday initiatives to just get them back in the door and have some low-key just community forming again. We really lost it all when we were in lockdown and then in the weird plexi masked years. So seeing the library as a space that can supplant the wellness initiatives that we're doing and be a safe space for students who maybe feel like they don't belong in the cafeteria. Like that is the classic space that people used to go eat lunch, you know, and we're still doing that, but we're expanding into our wellness curriculum too. Part of literacy is being able to ascertain what's real and what's not. And a real focus of mine this year has been knowing that these spaces that our students frequent, TikTok and Instagram, the health information that comes out of them is such a cesspool, and combating that was one of my focuses this year. And when you're doing the low-key programming like a Wellness Wednesday, they trust you as a wellness person to come into their space and tell them, you know, maybe you shouldn't tape your mouth shut while you're sleeping. That doesn't seem like the best wellness information, but I feel like people don't think of wellness and libraries as going hand in hand, and it became a real focus of mine to work with that department, and it's been so rewarding because to me it's, you know, when they go off to college, if they start feeling depressed or anxious, they're not going to fire up JSTOR to figure out what's going on. They're going to go to WebMD, they're going to go to Google. So giving them the skills to navigate that is a really important form of literacy that I need to hand to them before they leave us.
So hi, I'm Bridget Black. I am a senior production manager at Simon & Schuster. I'm also the vice president of the New York Book Forum. Oh shucks, you guys. This is, in the spirit of this being a conversation, this isn't really a question, but more publisher feedback, since what I'm hearing is kind of a call to action. And as I certainly can't speak for all of the publishers, but I did want to take a quick second to at least say that Simon & Schuster does have an initiative called Books Belong Everywhere. And on our website, which I believe is also called Books Belong Everywhere, we've got a list of titles we've identified that we're really proud of, including banned titles, a list of resources for fighting book bans, a list of organizations we support, and some reading guides. And a much better person to speak to about this would be Michelle Leo. She's our Vice President and Director of Education and Library Marketing. So we've definitely made strides, but we still have a long way to go. So just wanted to share that.
I say let's applaud Simon & Schuster and for the initiatives, and we need those. And we need to hear more about those. too as well.
Question.
So I noticed that you all said your mother are your inspirations. Mine was as well. And I really appreciate what you said about creating a culture of literacy that is beyond reading, but also about writing. And so when you mention this, I think about my family, where my literacy is in English, but theirs is not, or they might not be literate at all. And so a lot of what I know about my family's story is oral, and the writer of their story probably isn't going to be them. So, I wonder, what is the level of literacy that you find in your schools or in your programs? And is the literacy rate equivalent between the students and their parents? And if it's not, how can these families connect around books if they don't read in the same language or if they don't have the same literacy level? And how can we support these families to continue that connection if the books aren't available in both languages and if the parents don't have the same level of literacy?
I can start. So mine, we do work with a variety of cultures and languages across the country, and I think when possible, obviously, the dual language books are the most important and connectors for families. It is interesting because often the elders will have they speak the language, but again, in Navajo Nation that wasn't written down, and many other cultures around the world haven't written down even extensively their language yet. And so I do think that we need to continue to provide wherever possible, and everything we do is the native language and then the English translation. And just a quick story, and I shared this last time, my little, he's not little anymore, but 16, and he started Mandarin and immersion as a kindergartner. And to your story, very similarly, he came to me in second grade because we had to make a commitment that we would not teach him to read English until third grade, end of second grade. So he came to me that summer and was crying and said, "I don't know how to read." And I said, "Yes, you do. You can read, write, and speak Mandarin. Like, what are you talking about?" And so how do we lift up those other languages and make the parents, not the parents are proud, but have their children and young ones look up to them that, wow, they have all of these rich resources within their own being and within their own culture that I should learn. And it's been stigmatized for so long, is the native language. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but I think anytime we can create dual materials, language materials, and even maybe translators in certain communities.
I would say continue the telling the story, even if it's orally too as well. That particular engagement, I think, is so critical and so important. And I think it's also a skill that's kind of lost. For our program, what we really try to do is try to do also a cultural match with our early learning specialists. So they get someone from the community. And by the way, I believe a little bit over 60% of the parents who go through Parent-Child Plus curriculum also become early learning specialists within their community. So there's a workforce component that those who graduate from our program also get opportunities. Some have not only become early learning specialists, which is the starting level of Parent-Child Plus, but also become managers inside the program. And then they also encourage themselves, if they're not as literate, many have gone back to adult literacy education services in many of the libraries and also going back to school too as well. So we have seen that. But it's one of those other key components that we don't talk about as much in Parent-Child Plus. I would like to. Is really that cultural match from within the community. They know the services within the community. They speak the language of that particular family as they're bringing in the book, whether it's in the dual language or in the native language of their family as well, because it shows just the support that there are other families who are concerned about other families. And we used to do that. There used to be families and communities that actually cared about one another. We've kind of isolated ourselves now. I grew up in the 70s, so on my block, everybody knew everybody. And if I did something wrong, they were going to tell my mom. And I would get scolded for it. And my mother would tell them in the neighborhood, we have to get back kind of that neighborhood approach. The whole thing, it takes a village to raise a child, for us is real. That's real. Or for me, as part of my heritage and my background too as well. But when you bring in others from the same community inside the home, they build those positive relationships, and then they go on to graduate, and it's just a phenomenon. I wish I could bring all of you to a graduation at Parent Child Plus, because it's the most wonderful thing. They never want to let their early learning specialist or that home visitor go, and even the home-based child care. And we've had some that even graduate all the way to college, and they remember their early learning specialists. We have a program out in Westchester that actually has a college fund for Parent Child Plus participants who have gone through our program and now are going to college for all kinds of careers. And one has even come back to join the board. That's a lawyer, so.
That's awesome.
It works.
I think the way that we teach humanities is really crucial to having students feel like even if their story, I would love for every student that I have to feel like their story is represented on my shelves and in their history curriculum, and it's something that we're definitely working towards and not there yet. I don't know if any school is really 100% there yet, but just acknowledging that there's power in these spoken word stories and this vision of history. Whenever I'm teaching a history research class, I'm always mindful of what's missing. And a lot of times it is the voices in another language that haven't been translated for them, that aren't, sometimes it's just the reading levels. Like, we have to be aware of that the really amazing sources that they may get to in college and undergrad, like, how am I going to give that to a sixth grader and have them understand, lately I've been on a kick where I want to read about medieval women, and there's just not that much because no one was writing it down, no one cared. And, I get on my soapbox a little, and the kids are probably rolling their eyes when they're like, yeah, we've heard it, we don't have all the stories. But just the power of story and these individual experiences. I love oral history projects. I love things that tell them that this one perspective on history is so important, and that marriage between what happened and what happened to that person is so crucial. So even if we don't have the materials for them yet, we don't have every book translated into every language, we tell them that their voice is appreciated and their elders are appreciated, and if you can bring something to the class, that's even better.
Thank you. I love all those answers. Thanks.
Well, I want to applaud you for the fantastic work that you all do. It's just so impressive. But I wanted to just make a comment based on what you said about social media, TikTok, getting misinformation, and the opportunity that the library has, or teachers, to basically disinform people of incorrect information that they may be getting in social media. We all are aware that this week our Congress voted to ban TikTok, and the shocking number of people who are on TikTok, 175 million people, the dysfunction in our society that is, I think, again, to your point about social study awareness, to civic awareness on the part of the population. And I'm just wondering if there's a way, in the book publishing business, there was a phenomena, book talk, or TikTok book, or whatever it's called, but it was basically the promotion of books, on the TikTok platform. But is there a way to use the power of social media, like TikTok, which is so pervasive, to help educate people to be informed consumers, informed, civic-minded people? I think it's just such a critical point right now.
I think we need younger people to help us, because no one wants to listen to me on TikTok tell them what's right or wrong. I have a captive audience of students in my classroom, and they're great. They want to show me what's out there and what's dumb, and they don't believe it. But I have seen, I mentored a young student who was writing her own book, and she was just a TikTok marketing maven. She was 16 years old. It's her native place to be. For those of us who need Botox now, we don't want to be on that platform. We need the young folks to kind of come along with us and I think get on board with this. And that's who's on Book Talk. Like, it's not people our age, no offense to this whole panel. It's a micro generation or a full generation below us, and we need their help. I was just talking about how exciting it is when I have students who want to be teachers, you know, like to see that there are students and young people who want to be out there doing this, but I don't think we're going to have the power over that platform that they will.
I would just add, there have been, and help me remember, there have been some like iconic Instagram librarians that have risen to the top really quickly. Yes. One particular man, do you remember his?
Michael 3?
Yes, yes. He is awesome.
Okay,
and
he's a lot younger than we are.
Yes, but I think that we need to really rally around people like that is making reading cool. And he has one of the biggest followings. And so as publishers, how do we, I know many of you partner with celebrities or athletes, and many of the leagues have reading programs. But how do we really continue to push reading as cool, like mainstream? We all have to do it, right? Most of us here want to do it. And so I just think that we could maybe think differently on how to create those influencers in a different way. But yeah, if you don't follow him, please do. He is hilarious. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to second what you're saying. I think it's about promoting the positive messages around literacy. Social media is a tool, and it can be used in both ways, but I think if we continue to promote the positive messages and utilize that in an effective manner, then we can do that. But yeah, we need to bring the publishers and everyone else on board in order to promote those messages.
Well, and I think too, you know, I think it was Pink who recently, prior to or during, just prior to her concert, pushed out and gave out like 4,000 banned books to concert goers. So how do we do things a little differently and with guerrilla marketing and I don't know.
The Got Books campaign instead of Got Milk. You know?
Yeah, there you go.
Our generation knows that one.
It's true. One last question for the road?
As a younger person on social media, I think Book Talk's still around and really cool. I think Simon & Schuster did something really interesting recently where they sent just a social media guy on the Royal Caribbean 9-month world cruise for a few weeks. I think he was on there for 3 weeks, and they gave him a couple of books, and he led a Royal Caribbean book club that he hosted on TikTok, and a bunch of people were reading along with him and following his journey, and I just think interesting, weird things like that catch people's attention is the funniest instance of guerrilla marketing that I've seen in terms of book publishing. But Book Talk is alive and well for now, but I just thought that was a cool way to get people interested.
And maybe we volunteered to go on a cruise for that, for literacy.
You have legislations to work out, so you can't go on a world cruise. So, sure.
I don't know in other cities, but I live in Brooklyn, and I worked in a school for kids mostly with autism and kids with special needs. Mm-hmm. And we were big on getting bookmobiles from the Brooklyn Public Library, and they would go throughout, like Brooklyn, and it would come to our school. And it so excited the kids because a lot of the kids, they don't, like we were saying, they don't have access to libraries, they don't get to the library often, and they love the bookmobile. So that's another option.
Totally.
Long time ago, reading was fundamental. I remember the van going around with Clifford the dog, the red dog going around. But they are still going out there. There are some that are out there. But when you talk about special needs too as well, that's another key area. Maybe if we're invited next time, we can talk about the need for investment in early intervention and so forth, and developmental delays. We know coming out of the pandemic, we're seeing some of that with the children who have been isolated for 3 years and didn't have that social interaction, and how do they catch up in those particular things. I sit on the New York State Association of Infant Mental Health, and what we need are more practitioners to work with the younger kids, not with the older adults, and so forth. Kids are having long waiting lists to actually see someone to even be assessed. So it's a need. So
We got to get someone in a Clifford costume in the club.
My library has a mascot. Now I have an idea.
Yeah. Time to bring the Clifford costume out. It's 7:50. I will happily keep this conversation going like the last time, but I don't want our host, that's the word, thank you, our host, Scholastic, to be mad at us and say, why do you stay too long? But I have one story I want to share. I think what you folks are talking about is creating third space. And for me, the library was my third space. I would go in there, my library would always give me a book, and because I didn't like the cafeteria, so I went to the library. And it's sad to me that there are places turning their libraries into detention centers. That's horrible. But as a community of book publishers and people in the industry, it's important for us to remember that the reason we went into the industry is because we advocated for third spaces, and we need to support folks who want to create third spaces, because it's not only kids that need them, but the adults